Hey everybody, welcome back to IronHawk Research. We are an organization that's dedicated and passionate about spreading financial literacy and help people to build a better financial future. So today we are going to talk about comparative and absolute advantages. This economic concept can help you to make better decisions in the future. Without further ado, let's get right into it. So what is comparative advantage? Comparative advantage is an economy's ability to produce a particular good or service at a lower opportunity cost than its trading partners. So we say it's an economy's ability, but actually it's applicable to everyone, not just nations, to individuals as well. So what it really means is that your comparative advantage is something that you do more efficient than other people. An absolute advantage is the ability of anyone to produce a greater quantity of good or service with the same quantity of inputs. So here we are talking about absolute quantity of output, not efficiency. So the difference between comparative advantage and absolute advantage is that comparative advantage looks at the output per input, which is the efficiency, and absolute advantage takes a look at the total number of outputs with the same amount of input. So the difference between comparative advantage and absolute advantage is that comparative advantage looks at one's opportunity cost to produce something. Remember in the last video we talked about opportunity cost. Opportunity cost represents the potential benefit of you choosing an alternative over another. And absolute advantage only cares about the total number of outputs that you can produce with a set amount of resource. I know it might be confusing, but we'll demonstrate an example, so don't worry. So the next thing you need to understand is what's called production possibility frontier or production possibility curve. So it is a curve on the graph that illustrates the possible quantities that can be produced of two products if both depend upon the same finite resource for their manufacture. Again, it might be confusing, but you'll see what I mean. So here is an example. So the graph here is the production possibility frontier, this one. So the graph here is the production possibility frontier. So on the blue curve, any dot or any spot on the blue curve represents the possible combination of product can be produced by this individual or nation or company. The dot A represents a combination that is possible but not efficient. You see, because this is inside the curve, right? So what's inside the curve and on the curve is possible, but outside the curve, X is impossible. So inside the curve is possible but not the most efficient. On the curve is the most efficient. Outside the curve is not possible. So here's another example. So we have country A and B. The blue line represents the PPF for A between trucks and cars. And the red curve represents the PPF for B between trucks and cars. So here's the question. Who has the comparative advantage of producing trucks, and who has the comparative advantage of producing cars, and who has the absolute advantage of producing both goods? Take a second and think about it. So the answer is country A has the comparative advantage of producing cars. This is because for every car that country A produce, country A will have to give up 0.2 trucks. So the opportunity cost for country A to produce cars is 0.2 trucks. But the opportunity cost for country B to produce cars is 0.6 trucks. So the way that you calculate opportunity cost is to take the number of trucks that you can produce and divide by the number of cars that you can produce. So 6 divided by 30 is 0.2 and 21 divided by 35 is 0.6. So therefore, country A has the comparative advantage of producing cars over country B. So to answer the second question, who has the comparative advantage in producing trucks, we follow the same logic. So for country A to produce trucks, the opportunity cost is 5 cars. So for country A to produce 1 truck, it will have to give up 5 cars. But for country B, the opportunity cost for country B to produce trucks is 1.67 cars. So therefore, country B has the comparative advantage of producing trucks over A. Now, to answer the third question, who has the absolute advantage in producing both goods? Well, that's obvious, right? If you look at this graph, that country B can produce more trucks and more cars with the same amount of resource. So therefore, country B has the absolute advantage in producing trucks and cars. So among countries, when there is comparative advantage, countries should trade. Countries should focus on producing goods which they have the lowest opportunity costs, and then trade for some other products or goods with a higher opportunity cost to produce. Then countries in this trading agreement would benefit from each other. Same thing applies to individuals. We should focus on doing what we're best at, and then hire other people to do something that we are not as good as they are. That will boost your efficiency to another level. So that's comparative and absolute advantages. And thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.